Hello everyone, part 2 of the stream. Sorry, this is new. I really should learn how to use the software better. We were cut off halfway through that excellent interview with Ian Forth. I will find a way to broadcast that entire interview. I'll post it up here shortly afterwards. I'll put a link to it. I won't risk it again because, because I stuffed it up the first time and once bitten, twice shy. Let's go back to some of our news articles there. Also in the Sydney Morning Herald, we saw last week some of the initiatives that were being run by the government and the Australian Banking Association. Some fantastic work. And what we've seen now is a shift towards the idea of freezing or deferring payments, whether they be payments to businesses, whether they be payments to mortgages, and increasingly we're seeing there may even be some sort of lease or rent freezes, which is really great at helping ensure liquidity in the market, which is really excellent. What we're also seeing, though, quite sadly, is we're seeing a real push towards, a push back in the context of China's role in creating the Wuhan flu, in aiding, abetting, hiding, and really exporting it very successfully to the rest of the world. Great article here in The Atlantic. China is avoiding blame by trolling the world. Really, really great article. And there are a number of these articles that are now circulating, looking at those horrible early days of the Wuhan flu and how it was in particular very in typical communist style, the people of China were kept from the truth, which is really quite awful. Echoes of what happened at Chernobyl, interestingly enough, also under a communist regime, and that led to, as Mikhail Gorbachev said numerous times, that probably more than any other single event led to the downfall of the Soviet Union. You never know, maybe this could lead to the downfall of the Chinese Communist Party, which would be wonderful. Yuval Noah Harari, of course, wonderful writer, and we've read a couple of his books, they're really great, has written a really interesting piece about the world after coronavirus in the Financial Times. Worth reading. He discusses issues of, everything from freedom to totalitarianism, you name it. A slightly lighter topic here, and this is where we talk about some of the business opportunities that we've got in the world. Having a look at this Google Trends, search for gym equipment versus food delivery. Now, what this is Google Trends allows us to actually understand the interest in any particular category. And what's interesting about this is that in Australia over the past 30 days, the red line, food delivery, as you can see, was all very popular, and then just in the last few days has slightly increased. Whereas the blue line, which is gym equipment, has, understandably, far less urgency and importance, and from about March the 13th, 14th, rose from 6 to 8 to 12 to 13 to 17, and now basically indexing at 100. Food delivery is of half of the interest of Australia, if we use that as a measure at Google Trends or keyword search. Gym equipment searches are double food delivery searches. In other words, right now there is tremendous demand for gym equipment. People are going to be stuck at home and they want to keep fit. Interestingly enough, I would have thought this would be a fantastic opportunity for gyms all over Australia that are shutting down to rent out their gym equipment and rent out their whatever equipment they have, whether they be step machines, whether they be treadmills, whether they be weights, and actually use that as some sort of ongoing revenue source, and using digital channels, build that subscription model, have people there potentially doing online personal training and everything else. Now, it's baffling that we're not seeing that, and what's even worse is if we look at this particular thing and we look at gym equipment as a search right now, what we see is a number of ads for gym equipment through the likes of Temple & Webster, through the likes of Kogan, eBay, Amazon. They've all jumped on, but what we're not seeing is that there are any gym operators there actually looking at how they might pivot out of a physical gym into something a little bit more, let's say, agile. Now, talking of pivots, we've got another interview, and fingers crossed this one works. interview with a great friend of mine, Will Heiner. Fingers crossed. I'll get back to you in a second if it doesn't work. Will is talking about how he learned how to pivot from his time in the music industry.
Next guest here on Constantine Quarantine is experienced music industry operator and advisor, Will Heiner. Will, welcome to Constantine Quarantine.
Thanks, mate. Good to be here.
Now, Will, you've worked in the music industry for many years, largely in demand generation, sales. You ran a couple of different record companies and music distribution companies. Can you tell us about, now we're in obviously a relatively uncharted territory, or are we? Have you seen this before? Have you seen situations where physical sales fell off a cliff?
Well, I think the music industry is actually a pretty good example of kind of what we're facing now. The music industry being there through the time when physical sales dropped off the cliff, to use your words, it was so clearly coming. You know, we were watching multiple percentage drops in sales. Retailers were struggling. Retailers were reducing their shelf space that they were giving to CDs, and we didn't do anything about it. All we did is married to that channel, wouldn't move out of that channel, and almost treated digital as the enemy. The managing directors got together when, the first few streaming services came on board, or the sharing services came on board, and instead of jumping on board and saying, hey, how can we work with you? This is the way of the future. They sued the bastards.
Yeah, so we saw Metallica suing their fans for sharing their albums online in university campuses. We saw a whole range of ways in which they were trying to block it. But the other one that makes me laugh was this idea of online piracy. They weren't making their products physically available. As one of our former colleagues, Chris Murphy, once said, we've actually got this situation where you have to make someone get into their car, drive to a shopping centre, find a park, walk through, find a shop, go in there, find the stock, and then, of course, there's only 3 copies and they've all been sold. Then you'd have to put it on back order, or they could just go home, stay in their living room and download it off a site. He said, this isn't a piracy problem. This is a physical availability problem.
Well,
and he said that in 2000. I remember it clearly. He said it in 2001.
And the crazy thing about it, and it's actually really interesting because you look at the way that the industry progressed, particularly in Australia, right? So in Australia, we were a copyright protected market. So if the product wasn't released in Australia, you couldn't even import it on CD. It was fucking illegal, right? And we fought parallel importing like you wouldn't believe. We were so addicted to our own physical distribution channels that we just couldn't see the future, and we weren't listening to our customers.
And so are you seeing that in other industries? You're now advising across a range of industries. Have you taken those lessons? Because I know I've more or less forged my career as a digital strategist on what we learned in the music industry. What lessons have you seen, and what are some of the examples of what other businesses should and could be doing now, given the lessons you've learned in the music industry?
Well, I think, Conno, that the first, and I hate to use a term that's so widely used and abused and misunderstood in business, let alone in the digital world, but actually having a strategy, like having a clear digital strategy, and having that strategy be agile enough to adapt to the changes that your customers are demanding. You've got to do what your customers are demanding. So that's one thing, is having a clear and agile strategy, I think, is critical. The second thing is actually knowing your customers. And the great thing about the digital world is you have a better opportunity for doing that than ever before. And it just keeps getting better. And the third thing is, for mine, I'll call it pace over perfection. So don't let trying to get a good idea perfect stop you from having a go at something, right?
Yeah, ship something. It's that old mantra of move fast and break things.
That's right. Yeah, fail fast almost. And that's such a, in the startup community, that's such a commonly used term. But why don't we use it so much in business? I'll give you an example of one of the customers that I'm doing quite a lot of work with. They do live events, touring. They represent artists as agents, and they do really big stuff. Now, their entire business has fallen on its ass overnight due to this wonderful virus that we're experiencing. Now, it's a group of young guys who know their customers, who are super agile, super creative.
You're doing extraordinary growth as a business. Extraordinary growth. Like what type of annual growth are we seeing, in their revenues?
Look, their revenues would be growing 20-30% plus.
Per year?
Per annum, yep.
Fantastic.
Because they're so brave. They know their customers, and they know their customers because they look at them at their events, they watch them and they listen to them, and then they engage with them digitally all the time.
Outside of physical events, they're engaging digitally
all the time.
And what are they doing now? Now that we're in a situation where they can't run events.
So, the first thing that the guys did and the little marketing team did was, no idea is a bad idea. Let's put it out there. So we're doing stuff like playlists. We're doing festival fashion, all through Facebook, through Instagram. We're getting people involved. We're getting our consumers involved with what we're doing, and we're asking what they want to do. One of the other most exciting things that's happened is we can't do the shows live, but we can stream them. So, for example, one of our acts just following the Pace Over Perfection last weekend, totally organic, just said, I'm going to do a streaming thing. We coordinated, made it happen for him. Mate, he had over 10,000 views from a total organic exercise where we were almost treating it like a learning exercise. And it was fantastic. And the punters loved it. They were sharing it. They're talking to each other online. It's just fantastic.
And so the ability to then use that as you said, really vitally, a learning exercise that you're able to then say, okay, if we were to build on that next weekend, how do we do it? How would we monetize it? How do we get sponsors on board? Rather than saying, well, let's wait for perfection and in 6 months we'll run something, let's just iterate and ship it quickly.
And that's exactly what we're doing. We're going, okay,
fantastic.
We've got an event, and our next live stream event is locked in for the 4th of April. Then after that...
Right, we'll have to send the link, and we're allowed to say it's the Untitled Group, aren't we?
We are allowed to say the Untitled Group. And it's the 4 on the 4th. Dom Dollar's going to be leading the way on the 4th. It's going to be a fantastic live stream. Mate, if there are any sponsors out there watching this, they can contact you, Will. Yeah, they can. Love to hear from you. All right. Well, what we might do, Will, is we'll maybe hopefully this show lasts as long as the virus, which is about a week. But sadly, I think we're going to be here for a bit longer. What we might do is catch up with you in the lead up to that event and talk about how you're monetizing it, whether you're selling tickets, how you're actually bringing it to life, because I'm sure there are a lot of tips and tricks that you've learnt, not only from that last show, but in the lead up to this show, that you might be able to share with other business people that are watching this. Great. Would love to, mate. Good on you, Will. Good luck. Stay safe and stay tuned. Thanks, Conno. See ya.
There is the great man, Will Heiner. And his work at Untitled Group, and there's lots of lessons there for organisations that are battling to pivot, to monetize, to create content outside of their normal day-to-day. And what we're seeing a lot of, last week was panic, last week was distress, last week was a hell of a lot of heartache for everyone, and that still continues, sadly. But what we're seeing is some real green shoots of innovation and some really clever thinking, and I think Will and the group at Untitled are part of that. What we're also seeing now is some really interesting apps and digital innovation coming through in the form of things like symptom tracker. There's COVID symptom tracker apps. We're involved in building one, so stay tuned. In the next few days, we should have proof of concept up and running. What we've also got here is a wonderful, wonderful article from the Wall Street Journal. Is the coronavirus as deadly as they say? It's not a contrarian piece, but it is a piece that actually looks at some of the data and again tries to make sense of some of the testing. This is more or less a critique of the testing methodologies that are used by various governments, and the argument that it is very, very, very difficult for people policymakers to make any decisions on the basis of relatively flawed data collection in the form of testing. We also have one more thing here, which is just fallen off my screen. We've got our celebrity COVID of the day, and we've actually got two celebrities, Paolo Dybala from Juventus and Paolo Maldini from AC Milan. The champion soccer players there have both got COVID-19. So best wishes and love to Paolo Maldini and Paolo Dybala. Both of them apparently are in quite good shape. It is relatively asymptomatic in both of those particular soccer superstars. And we go from soccer to stock broadcast. One of the interesting things that we're all seeing at the moment is that we're all on Zoom. Part of this show is recorded on Zoom, and if we look at the stock ticker for Zoom Technologies, what we see here is that the stock ticker shows incredible growth from Zoom Technologies, something like up to 688% growth. If you'd bought this stock a month ago, you would have made 688% on your money. That's particularly interesting, given that Zoom is actually not the company that makes the technology. So if you bought Zoom, you'd still be up 109%. The problem is that the software Zoom is actually got the code ZM, and Zoom ZM has gone up in the last month only 25%. So interestingly, Zoom Technologies, which has got nothing to do with the video conferencing software, has gone up 89%, while the actual company that is making the software has gone up 26%. So if you're investing, steer clear of Zoom Technologies, and maybe you want to invest in ZM. And remember that this advice is generic in nature and should not be taken without the advice of a certified and accredited financial planner. Let's go towards the end now. What we've got is some really cool resources here, some really cool things that we've found just to pet people up before we finish. TED Ed have basically made free a whole range of resources if you are teaching or learning from home. So thank you to the people at TED. That's really, really wonderful. What we also have is a story here that 190 universities have just launched 600 free online courses, and here's the full list. I'm not going to go through them all, but there are some really, really, really wonderful things that we could all learn if we're stuck at home. One brilliant way of passing the time is by feeding our brains. And hopefully, Penso, this wonderful organization, visionary digital consultancy, has also put out some, what we believe are some really great tips about working from home. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening and watching. Sorry that we've had two streams today and two broadcasts. One of the first interview with Ian Forth was cut short abruptly. What I may do is actually put that back up as a separate link, because it's a fascinating conversation I had with Forthy earlier. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's anything you'd like to send through, please do. Thanks again for watching. And the only kind of thought I have is stay safe, stay hygienic, stay solvent, stay sane, stay at home, stay informed, and stay tuned. Cheers. See you later, everyone.